What's going down, everybody? Welcome back to another CAD Pop Patreon submitted Decktech. Today we're doing Tayam Luminous Enigma. Let's get to it right now. Alright, we are back for another Patreon submitted Decktech brought to you by FusionGamingOnline.com. They're your source for all your gaming needs. You can pick up cards here if you need them. If they're out of stock, set a wish list reminder. You'll get an email. You hop on, you buy the card. As soon as it comes in, make sure that you let them know at checkout that Ryan from Commander at Populum sent you. You saw the Decktech. And it's great. Big thanks to Roxanne Bones for sending this one in. First deck that she's getting featured. And it's a good one. I like it. Combo list. And remember, the CAD Pop Decktechs, they're for three groups of people. The new players looking to branch out, get out of their comfort zone. First deck. This deck might appeal to those people because we're playing a combo deck today. The second group of people are those looking to refine an edge, expand their arsenal of decks. This deck might be that. Maybe you've built a deck already. Now it's time to expand or refine your combo edge. Go outside your comfort zone. Do something with lots of triggers, lots of moving pieces. So let's cross our fingers that I don't butcher that today, because decks like this I think are pretty hard to feature. The third group of people, and maybe this applies today, is the long-time nostalgic players, the players looking to feel something, maybe build around a pet card, what have you. Those are the three groups that we're catering to. If you fall into any of those categories, you're in luck. If you want to have your deck featured, you can go to patreon.com/cadpopcast, check out the reward tiers, find the Decktech one, help the show grow, keep the lights on, all that jazz that you're supposed to say now that we're on YouTube. And if you're listening to this audio only, hop on over, links are in the show notes to the YouTube page, give it a like, give it a subscribe. We're brand new, we just launched, and this Decktech is being recorded quite a far ways from where it would launch, so I hope we're doing good. If you want to let me know, you can leave a comment below on YouTube, or you can get at me at CAD Popcast on Twitter, Commander at Populum on Facebook, or shoot your deck over to cadpopcast@gmail.com. Now, let's get to the deck. We're going to read Tayam. If you're not watching the YouTube page, we got to read them. So this is a 3/3 Nightmare Beast for green, black, white, 1. Each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional vigilance counter on it. So it's going to enter the battlefield and get vigilance. That's great. You can go 3, remove 3 counters from among creatures you control, put the top 3 cards from your library into your graveyard, then return a permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So I'm assuming we're going to get counters on things, and then we're going to pay 3 and return things from our graveyard and then sacrifice them again, creating some sort of loop. That's the graveyard loop. And for newer players, green, black, white are very good at doing the graveyard loop type things. If you look at commanders on Scryfall or Gatherer that have that Abzan green, black, white color combination, you're going to see a lot of decks like that. Tayam is like that. Rayhan, and then you pair her with something that has white in it, is going to do the +1 counter things when things die. Karud, Ghost Chieftain from C11 is going to do that. So before we get into all that, though, we got to get some of the minutia out of the way. Some of the kind of the building blocks of the deck, the standard stuff that we see all the time. We're going to start with ramp. Roxanne's got custom categories. Thank you very much. Very important when submitting a deck. So let's bang through these. There's Arcane Signet, Commander Sphere, Crystalline Crawler. That one gives you mana for how many +1 counters are on it. Deathrite Shaman, Devoted Druid, Mind Stone, Sakura Tribe Elder. You get a land for sacrificing it. We can probably loop that back. Sol Ring, Spring Bloom Druid, Wall of Roots. You can put a -1 counter on that to add a green, Wayfarer's Bauble, and Wood Elves. That's going to search for a forest. And remember, you can search for dual lands with that if we are playing any. We are playing Indotha Triome, which does have basic land types that we could find with that Wood Elf because it is a forest. And of course, we are playing forests, and one of the cards that we're playing is going to want us to get forests out of our deck. I see a maybe board that includes some shock lands that you could find if you have the budget for it. You could find those with Wood Elves if they have forest subtype. So that's some of our ramp. We've also got a Pawn of Ulamog, and I wanted to take a minute with this one because whenever it or another creature dies, you get a token, Eldrazi token, that you can sacrifice for a mana. It's just a 0/1. This is more than just a ramp spell though, because if we're starting to loop things over and over in and out of our graveyard with Tayam, we're going to be able to get a lot of Eldrazi spawns and sack them to generate a lot of mana. So not only is this a ramp card, this could be a combo card. 13 pieces in total, that's lots. The average converted mana cost of the deck is 2.66, so it's pretty low, and with 13 ramp pieces, we can make it work. Remember, we're going to generate mana with that Pawn of Ulamog and a couple other things. So let's look at the removal. We've got an Assassin's Trophy, Nature's Claim, Oubliette, Reverent Silence. That's if you control a forest, you can have another player gain 6 life instead of paying its mana cost. So it's a free spell and it destroys all enchantments. We've got a Snuff Out. That's another free one. Swords to Plowshares, Tormod's Crypt, Unexpectedly Absent. That'll allow you to blink tokens and then they're gone forever. Vampire Hexmage removes counters from things. A Veil of Summer, that's a counter spell, sort of, for black and blue cards. Those are kind of like the removal proper. And then we've got Dictate of Erebos and Grave Pact. Whenever we lose a creature, everybody else has to sack a creature. And remember, when we're bouncing things into our graveyard over and over and over and over again, it's going to continuously wipe the board if we have a Grave Pact effect on the battlefield. We've got a Glory, that is an incarnation from Judgment. You can pay 2 and white. Creatures you control gain protection from the color of your choice until end of turn, but you can only do that when it's in your graveyard. So this is the one that this is one of the ones that we'd want to sacrifice, then leave in our graveyard, then we can pay 3 to give protection. Lets us get attackers through if we need to do that, or more importantly, it lets us block and keep our creatures alive. Finally, we've got a Tech Edge. This is our 32nd land, it looks like, in the deck, and it is going to allow us to pay 1, tap, sacrifice it, destroy target non-basic land if an opponent has 4 or more lands. So this is like the affordable 79-cent sort of strip mine or wasteland. So don't forget, land destruction lands are very important, especially if you've got the mana production in your ramp section, for example, like we have today, that are going to allow you to sacrifice a land and not care that much. That's all great. Now, we are playing Tayam. We do want some stuff in our graveyard, some stuff that we can return if we don't have Tayam out to remove counters from among permanents and then mill ourselves and then get something back. We do want to have more choice than just that. So we've got 3 self-mill cards. The first one, this is actually our 33rd land, and that's a Dakmor Salvage. I'm not sure if you count this as a land because you're going to mostly want to have it in your hand or in your graveyard. What it is enters the battlefield tapped. You could tap it for a black, or if it's in your graveyard, it has Dredge 2. If you would draw a card and it is in your graveyard, you can mill 2 cards and return it to your hand. We just need to have some way to either destroy it if it's on the battlefield, or discard it, or mill it to get itself back into our hand, put it on top of our library, mill it again. We just have to have some way of getting it into the graveyard so we can mill cards to get it back to our hand. Next, we've got Mesmeric Orb. I love this card. I play it in at least one deck, and it's whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. People hate this card because they don't want to mill, like it's going to affect them in some meaningful way. Mill is random and people need to understand that. But in a dedicated mill strategy, this card is actually very powerful. Comes down on turn 2, turn 1 if you have a Soul Ring though, and it's going to mill you for 2, 3, 4, 5, 11 per turn if you can set it up. I would maybe like to see more mana dorks that tap and give us mana because we're playing that Mesmeric Orb. Maybe turn that Sakura Tribe Elder into like a Bloom Tender, for example. The Bloom Tender is going to tap for 3 mana if you have Tayam out. And then when it untaps, you're going to mill an extra card, where the Sakura Tribe Elder, it's going to tap and sacrifice itself, then it's not going to be back. Now, I get that the Sakura Tribe Elder can be looped over and over with Tayam, and that might be better, but in a deck where we're only playing 8 basics, we can only do that like 7 more times after the initial time we do it. And if the budget of the deck ever goes up to include some of the fetch lands that are in the maybe board, that Sakura Tribe Elder is going to get less and less good to loop, where the Bloom Tender is going to provide you continuous value with the Mesmeric Orb. I don't know, that's just where my brain goes. I like Bloom Tender. I just reviewed it very highly on the Eventide set retrospective on Commander Ad Populum proper. Who knows? Who knows what's better? I've never tested with the deck. What I do know is we're playing those 8 basics, and our third self-mill card is Hermit Druid. Yes, this is Hermy D, one of my favorite cards. This is a 1/1 for green 1. You can pay green, tap it, reveal cards from the top of your library to reveal a basic land card. So in this deck, you're going to reveal a good number of cards before you hit a basic. All the cards you reveal go into your graveyard, and the basic land goes into your hand. Honestly, I think in a combo deck, Hermit Druid and 8 basics is too much. And I would look to cut those basics maybe for lands that have 2 mana types that you can find with your Wood Elves. I would cut them for fetch lands, budget permitting. Maybe drop 1 of each basic. When I look at the color distribution, it's fairly even between green and white and black. But I think officially we do have the most black mana symbols. So I would say maybe cut a plains, cut a forest, add in the appropriate fetch lands, and that'll make Hermit Druid just a touch better because you do want to maximize that card. People know that card, and when you land it and you untap with that card, people are going to want to kill it because they assume you're going to win with it. You might as well in a combo deck build your deck in such a way that you are going to win with it and make it have its reputation. Make it live up to the reputation. Otherwise, you're just kind of spending 2 mana and doing nothing with a card. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're running 8 basics and you flip 2 and you hit a basic and it's like, oh, how good is my self-mill then? But if you cut down to 3, 4 basics and you can increase your odds of milling your whole deck essentially, or milling 10, 15 cards, it makes Hermit Druid a ton better. That's what I have to say about Hermy D. Let's move on to some tutors. We've got a Buried Alive, 3 mana, search for 3 creatures, put them into the yard. That's going to fuel Tayam with exactly the cards that we want to reanimate loop. That's great. We've got Entomb, does the same thing, but for any card and instant speed. That too is going to fuel Tayam for what we want to loop. Now here's one. Here's a nifty little nugget. This is Lost Auramancers. I didn't even talk about this card in the Future Sight Set Retro a few weeks ago. This is white 2 for a 3/3, human wizard, vanishing 3, so every upkeep you remove a vanishing counter. When there's none more, it's gone. But when it's put into the graveyard, if it had no time counters on it, you search your library for an enchantment card, put it onto the battlefield. That's a good one. We're going to find out what enchantments we're going to want to find. Maybe we find Pattern of Rebirth. That's funny, then that's the next card we talk about. It's like that was planned. This is an enchant creature aura, 3 and green. When enchanted creature dies, that creature's controller may search their library for a creature card, put that card onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. So we're going to see if that has any ways to find us a creature that we might get something back with or help us loop with Tayam, something like that. The final one is Vivian Monster's Advocate. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library. That could be important. You can +1 to create a 3/3 beast and then put a trample counter on it. And remember, you can remove that trample counter to Tayam's ability because it just says remove counters from among permanents you control. So that's good. And you can -2 her. And when you do, the next time you cast a creature spell, you search your library for a creature with less converted mana cost and put it onto the battlefield. So you search for a thing and then you get a smaller thing. Great. Okay, next up, we've got the stuff that adds counters, the counter stuff, if you will. We got Basri's Lieutenant enters the battlefield. You put a +1 counter on target creature you control. When Basri's Lieutenant or another creature you control dies, if it had a +1 on it, you get a 2/2 Knight. Good Fortune Unicorn, creature enters the battlefield, put a +1 counter on that creature. That's great with some upcoming creatures that care about counters. Luminous Broodmoth, when something dies, you bring it back with a flying counter on it. So that's going to allow us to, if your thing doesn't have a flying counter on it, have it die, and then come back with a flying counter on it. And then, because Tayam lets us remove counters, we can sacrifice it again and get it back with something else that we're going to see in a second. Nesting Ground, that lets us move counters. So that might be important with the Luminous Broodmoth counter when we move a flying counter from a creature we want to die onto something else so we can get it back. Netherborn Altar, put a soul counter on it. And then you can put your commander from the command zone into your hand. and you lose 3 life. The point is we get a counter on that. Power Conduit, remove a counter from a permanent you control to put a charge counter on something or a +1 counter on something. Again, +1 counters are going to be important in a minute. Finally, Vizier of Remedies. If one or more -1 counters will be put onto a creature you control, that many -1 counters are put onto it. Seems like a non-bo in the deck, but wait until you see one of the things that we're going to do. Finally, before we get to the goods, Animate Dead, Dance of the Dead, Karmic Guide, Lurus the Dream Den, Renegade Rallier, Revelark. So there's our Karmic Guide Revelark combo that I talked about in one of the Lorwyn Shadowmoor set retrospectives. Safi Eric's Daughter, and Tortured Existence, of which I think Roxanne has an altered art one from myself. That's our 8-card recursion package. If for whatever reason we can't do it with Tayam, or if something gets reanimated and we need to do something a little bit differently, we've got a package there that's going to service us from the graveyard. If we self-mill, we don't have Tayam, we want to get something back, what have you. Those are the cards that are going to do it. Okay, next up, we've got a flash category. We've got Vivian, Champion of the Wilds. Creature spells have flash. That might be important if we're flashing something in during a combo type loop scenario, or at the end of somebody's turn where we left some mana open to maybe bluff interaction or make sure that we have a kill spell if we're going to get attacked. We can flash something in if we didn't have to spend that mana. Next turn, untap, and it's like we saved ourselves 2 mana on the turn that we comboed, or we saved ourselves a mana on the turn that we comboed. So that's great. Vivian gives a creature vigilance, or lets us look at the top 4 of our library to get a creature. It's fine. The last one is, this time I promise, actually our last land. This is Emergent Zone, and this just gives, you can sacrifice it and you can cast spells this turn as though they had flash. So that's important. I don't think it's integral to the combo, but it is just important to be able to have flash to save yourself mana or leave up interaction if you need. Important cards, but don't need to spend a ton more time there. Now, sacrifice outlets. Here we go. The real business. All the business people in suits of the deck. First one. I promise this time is the last time. This is the actual last land in the deck. This is Phyrexian Tower. It's a legendary land. Taps for colorless, or tap, sack a creature, get black. The point is we can sack a creature on a land. It gives us some sacrifice redundancy. The black is incidental. We want to sack the creatures. That's what this deck is doing. We've got Yeheni Undying Partisan. Sacrifice a creature, gets indestructible until end of turn. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1 counter on Yeheni. That's great. He's got haste. That's great. Fanatical Devotion. Didn't we just play this card last week or the week before? It's funny. It comes up like twice, two decks in a row. This is sack a creature, regenerate target creature. Great. Fallen Ideal. This is a good one. It's an enchant creature. Enchanted creature has flying, and sacrifice a creature. This creature gets +2/+1. Then, if it's put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you can return it to your hand. So it's got some recursion on there. That's great. Cartel Aristocrat. Black-white 2/2 Human Advisor. Sack a creature. Cartel Aristocrat gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. Great. Carrion Feeder. Can't block 1/1. Sack a creature. It gets a +1 counter. That's important that it gets a counter too, just like Yeheni, because you can remove those counters from among permanents you control, says Tayam. That's great. Ashnod's Altar, that's mana production sack, get 2 mana, very important card in combo decks because you don't care about your throwaway creatures, you just care about making more mana. Finally, we've got Altar of Dementia. This is one of our win conditions. Sack a creature, target player puts a number of cards equal to that the sacrifice creature's power into their graveyard. So they mill equal to the power of the creature that we sacrifice. That's a win condition. Finally, we've got Blood Artist. Target player loses a life, we gain a life when a creature dies. Any creature. Caller of the Claw. This is a 2/2 elf for green 2. It's got flash. Enters a battlefield, put a 2/2 green bear creature token onto the battlefield for each non-token creature that died under your control this turn. So if we can loop, and then cast this anytime, we're going to get a whole bunch of tokens that then we can sack to Ashnod's Altar or Altar of Dementia and mill somebody, make a ton of mana so we can continue to loop. Okay, now here is a combo enabler right here. Champion of Lambholt. This is a human warrior 1/1 for green 1. Creatures with power less than Champion Lamholt's power can't block creatures you control. Great, it's going to make our creatures tough to block the bigger that it gets. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Lamholt. Okay, so whenever a creature ETBs, it's going to get big. We can remove those counters to pay for Tayam, or if we've got a whole bunch of creatures, and we did a bunch of this like at the end of player 3's turn, we can untap maybe with a bunch of bears from that Collar of the Claw, and we can swing in with Champion of Lamholt. It kind of provides us a win condition in two separate ways. So now we've got a win condition in Altar of Dementia. We've got a win condition in two different ways in Champion of Lamholt. That's pretty cool. We've got a Corpse Knight. Creature enters the battlefield. Each opponent loses a life. That's like an opposite aristocrat. Liliana Standard Bearer enters the battlefield, draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of creatures that died under your control this turn. If we loop, cast a Liliana Standard Bearer, or get that from our graveyard with Tayam, we can essentially draw maybe our whole deck. And you say, well, Ryan, how do we do that? Roxanne, how do we do that? We will die. We only have 40 life. We've got 80 cards in our deck, what have you. Well, we've got a Kitchen Finks. And remember, these are all 3 CMC cards or less, so we can get them all back with Tayam. And a Kitchen Fink, when it enters the battlefield, we gain 2 life. And what's cool about this is it lets us actually gain 4 life, because we can enter it once, sacrifice it, and it's got persist, so it'll come back and gain us 2 more life, and then we can sacrifice it again and then get it back from Tayam. And if we do that, we're actually going to double up on Champion of Lamholt triggers as well. So our champion from that exchange is going to get 2 counters, because the Kitchen Finks enters the battlefield twice. So the champion gets +2/+2. Tayam can remove both of those. That's great. Or if the champion already has 1 counter, for example, from a different creature, we can cast our Kitchen Fink, champion will get a 2nd counter, sack the Kitchen Fink, it'll come back, champion will get another counter, and then our Kitchen Fink will have a -1 counter on it. We can pay 3. Maybe we got that 3 mana from sacrificing Kitchen Finks and something else, like our Eldrazi Scion from our Pawn of Ulamog. We can sacrifice that to our Ashnod's Altar. We've netted 4 mana because we sacrificed 2 creatures. We can use 3 of that 4 mana, remove 2 counters from the Champion of Lamholt, remove the -1 from our Kitchen Finks. There's our 3 things, our 3 counters. We get something back with Tayam. We've netted a mana on this exchange. We've removed our counter from our Kitchen Finks, and our Champion of Lamholt still has that original counter that it had on it. And we can do this and do this and do this and do this, gaining 2 life or 4 life. Just kind of depends on how many counters Champion of Lamholt has, or if we have that Pawn of Ulamog, if we have to sacrifice that Kitchen Finks twice. We can do this until we gain all the life in the world, until we Corpse Knight our opponent to death, or Blood Artist our opponent to death, or because we can do all that at the end of player 4's turn, if we have an extra green mana up, because we're going to have the 2 generic from the Ashnod's Altar, we can Collar of the Claw at end of turn and put in like 5 billion 2/2 bear creature tokens at the end of their turn. We untap with that, and then we crash in and nobody can block because our champion is like a million power, right? So if that's not enough, we've got a Spore Frog. I think that is there because we can loop it and we can just never take combat damage, right? Because Spore Frog, you sack it to prevent all combat damage, and we can get that back with Tayam by removing counters from our champion. We can remove loyalty counters from our planeswalkers. We can remove -1 counters from our Kitchen Finks. Honestly, I would like to see lands in here that might have counters, like a Blast Zone or a Storage Land. Maybe not a Storage Land because it ETB tapped, but a Blast Zone would be great because it acts as removal and it acts as something that we can remove counters from. That's kind of cool. Finally, if that all wasn't enough, we've got a Sir Conrad the Grim. This is a 5/4 for black 3, and essentially whenever anything goes into your graveyard or out of your graveyard to any zone, Conrad's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent. So this is essentially this is the big time aristocrat. In or out, damage, 5/4, and you can play black 1. Each player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. great. If we can make a whole bunch of mana, we can start milling ourselves. In addition to everybody, Conrad's gonna mill. So this kind of acts as another mill kind of backup win con. And budget permitting, Conrad is the kind of card that I would say, hey, find room for Phyrexian Altar, because you can sack a creature to do your whole loop thing, and you can get black mana. After you make colorless mana from your Ashnod's Altar, you combo, you build up a whole bunch of colorless, then you start sacrificing to Phyrexian Altar to make black, and what that's going to do is going to allow you to use all your colorless stored up, use all your black stored up to Sir Conrad people to death. And we don't really care about all that self-mill because our commander wants us to do that. We are playing a Tormod's Crypt that allows for us to exile our opponent's graveyard if they are starting to look a little bit scary, a little bit degenerate. For the same reason, I would suggest a Bojuka Bog in this deck. It's in the maybe board. I would move that into the main board, maybe instead of a swamp. Or if you took my advice on the shock land, dual land, fetch land type situation, maybe instead of like a forest or a plains, if you've replaced a swamp with like some kind of dual land to make Hermit Druid better. Those are kind of the little changes that I would make. I think that kind of thing makes the deck really awesome. You could go Lotus Petal, you could go Elvish Spirit Guide. Those are going to give you mana for free. And that's the deck. I hope that it was easy enough to follow. Combo decks are sometimes pretty tricky. That's another reason I'm excited for all of the YouTube content to start rolling out for the Decktechs. I love the deck. I love combo decks. I don't play them that often because sometimes they're convoluted, hard for people to follow. Sometimes you just have to sit and tank and do stuff where other people have to sit and just watch. That is kind of the downfall of combo decks. So if you are a new player or if you're looking to expand your arsenal, make sure that you practice playing your combo decks and make sure that you kind of get proficient in manipulating cardboard, searching for multiple things at a time as a shortcut, putting stuff in zones that allow you to keep things organized, especially when you've got something like that Vizier of Remedies, Champion of Lambholt, Kitchen Finks kind of interaction where, you know, it's supposed to get counters, but it doesn't, and you can keep killing it, and it dies, and it comes back, and it's like, lots of times players aren't going to understand that if you shortcut it too much, but you do have to shortcut it to demonstrate like there's a loop or what have you. So just make sure you practice all that, organize it in a way that it's easy for players to understand and that you're proficient at explaining it and knowing where and when the triggers are coming from and going to. All of that being said, I'd like to thank FusionGamingOnline.com. They are the official sponsors of the CADPOP Patreon Decktechs. You can go there for all of your gaming needs, all of your deck tech needs. If you liked any of the cards, any of the interactions in this deck, pick up your Tayam, pick up your Champions of Lambholt and your Kitchen Finks and your Academy Rectors. I didn't even suggest that card, but that gets all of your enchantments back from your graveyard when it dies, so you can get your Pattern of Rebirth back and then search for other things. That would be a good little synergy to get some of your reanimation enchantments or what have you. Maybe if that's the route that you go, maybe you go Bastion of Remembrance. It's like an Aristocrat's enchantment. Maybe that's a little direction that this deck might want to go. But I digress. I have to thank the patrons over at patreon.com/CADPOPcast. You're the other group of people that make this possible. Without you guys, there'd be no decks to submit. So if you want to have your deck featured, head on over. Link is in the comments. Find the Deck Tech benefit. Send me a list, become part of the Discord family. We talk about the decks and the episodes and all the community stuff that we do. We share soup recipes, what have you. It's a good time, and I am thankful for all of the Patreon supporters, all of the listeners in general, all the new YouTube subs now that we're here. It's very exciting for me. Next week on Commander Ad Populum proper, it sounds like we're going to have a very special guest, a returning guest. So if you liked any of our past guests, you're in luck. Not going to say too much more than that, other than check out Commander Ad Populum on Facebook, at CADPopcast on Twitter, cadpopcast@gmail.com, and I will see you next Wednesday.